Hello, everyone, and welcome to Focus and Foundations. My name is Tina Kramer, and I am the creator of Simple Learning and the patent pending sound device. And I am here with my wonderful friend, Kelley. Kelley, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kelley Phipps, and I own a company called Empowering Minds, where we work with adults and kids that have any number of learning or social issue that stems from disorientation. And so today, as we were pondering what we wanted to actually talk about, we started thinking about the idea of emotions. And so, Tina, would you like to start us out today?
Okay, so interesting enough, Kelley and I, we do plan, believe it or not, but we also try to have really candid conversations. And we were talking about the fact in so many ways, we are really trying to eat the whole entire elephant, but one piece at a time, because this is such a wide learning difference is just huge category and what that entails. And then we just keep taking these little bites and sharing the information. So what we discussed today was we wanted to talk to all of you and share about disorientation and how it is relative to emotion. And then I went, oh my gosh, that's huge. That's an amazing idea, Kelley. And she goes, oh, there's so much I can say about it. And I'm like, me too. And so we both stopped ourselves. And that's where our conversation stopped, because we want to honor the fact as you, as the listener, based on your life experiences, what you're expecting or what you're thinking of may be quite different than the reference that we're making or that we're taking. And Kelley and I want to try to mimic as much as we can, raising awareness, but also the kind of conversation if we were sitting down with one of you. And we take the time to understand where you're coming from, and then we have the information and we adapt the information according to where our clients are coming from. So we're going to actually attempt to do that with each other today. So disorientation as it is to emotion. First of all, disorientation in itself can be quite different for everyone. But I'm going to really simply, and then Kelley, I'm going to ask you to add to it. But disorientation is when the brain is not receiving correct information from the five senses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it also can be as simple as we start to space out. We go out into our imagination. So Kelley, before I even jump into the emotion side of it, anything you want to add to that definition of disorientation?
Well, for personally, it is anytime that you're confused. You're confused about something. You're like, I don't get that. Well, that in and of itself is where input did not quite meet reality. And so it's something that's very typical and necessary for every individual. So it is a process that we all experience, part of the human experience. So when we're talking about disorientation, we're talking about disorientation that's kind of like big and making a problem in our world, right? Not the typical stuff we all experience, because you have to. There's nothing wrong with it, and you need to embrace it.
Yeah.
But it's when it causes a problem.
We even, it's a very natural part of being human. So in order to fall asleep at night, we disorient.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about the more.
The more, exactly, the more.
Okay, so we tried to clarify disorientation for you then. And then how disorientation is related to emotion. So when I think of that, I'm thinking of an individual that becomes overwhelmed. All right, but I'm talking about an overwhelm that again is part of that more. So somebody that is developmentally, for lack of a better term, delayed. So even though I might be, because I usually am working with adults or young adults, someone that should experience the full gamut of emotion. However, something will happen in their life to where they get to the point of let me give an example. I had a shipment that I had to send out of sound devices, and it was going internationally and it was stopped. They wouldn't ship it. And I got a letter, and the letter said I had to come pick up the shipment within 2 days. And if I didn't get it picked up, they were going to dispose of. And this was a lot of money. So I freaked out. There was a point in time in my life where I would have gotten something like that, and it would have thrown me into a tizzy. And if you'd have seen me, I literally would my brain would have started doing this, because my emotion and the shock and the overwhelm would have caused me to step out of sequencing, go off into my imagination, and just be incredibly upset. So, and I know we're going to dig deeper, but for me, that's my first thought when I think of disorientation related to emotion. So, Kelley, what do you think?
I think of the type of reaction that I see in individuals that is much more intense than one would expect it to be for that situation. So, as what you're describing, right? You encountered a hurdle, or in the past, if you had encountered that hurdle, you would have basically broken down, not been able to easily get yourself through it, or it would have taken you amount of time, inordinate amount of time to get yourself out of it. And for me, it's more often I'm seeing it in individuals that they get angry for something that for a typical individual, not so much you should get so angry about that one. Or they have a vision in their head. Usually it has to do with the fact that they have a picture, they think in pictures, and they have a picture in their head that reality didn't match, right? It didn't match. And so it could be any of the emotions, but lots of times it comes out through anger, and they lash out. And it's more of an impulsivity, but rather than an emotion that is like inward, it's an emotion that is outward. And whoever's on the receiving end, heaven help them, right? Straight out.
Okay, so I always try to come up with, remember, I'm a lay person. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a teacher, but I try to come up with examples that people can relate to. So if we think in terms of somebody that is developmentally delayed, all right, and we would think of a young child's reaction to, like you said, they have a picture in their mind of what they want or how they think things are going to turn out. And then life happens differently, and then you see that outburst. So it's comparable to that. However, if we see that in a young child, you'd be like, well, they're young.
It's a tantrum, right?
Yeah, it's part of the age that they are, and you don't get upset. However, when we're actually looking into this development and we see an adult that's actually having the same reaction of that young child, then we change and we use very different words. They're overreacting, they're impossible to work with, it's inappropriate. Per the age, it isn't inappropriate. And I'm not saying that it's not. But we're supposed to, when we get older, be able to handle our emotions in a positive way. Now, the other side of this I would like to talk about a little bit is there are people that I come in contact with that don't have enough emotion. So they really haven't developmentally went through that process to where they do experience anger. They're prior to the tantrum. And then it's almost like they're in a situation where they would be justified. So I had an adult that I worked with that had lost a dear pet. They were terribly upset about losing the pet, and there was crying that happened. However, and again, I'm going to go back to when my kids were little, and I can remember there were times when my kids wanted to experience an emotion. They had seen others experience emotion, and they were trying to cry, and it was almost a fake cry.
Yeah.
So then we also see that as part of the disorientation with an adult or an older individual or student, because they're like, okay, in this moment, I feel like I should be crying, so let me try to cry.
Mm-hmm.
But they never really get into the fruition, the fullness of their emotions. And then so that's a disorientation in in the opposite of what we experience for a neurotypical individual, because they're trying to express something they're really not feeling, and they're doing it because they think they should.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find that many people that you work with are afraid of their emotions?
What I see in the United States especially is that emotions are vilified, especially for men. But then I also work with individuals that are developmentally delayed and they've not experienced. So there's a difference between the two. There's a process that I take people through depending on where they are, and there's a bit of a tease to where you're pulling them through to really start to experience appropriate emotions. And then sometimes there's a little bit of a push. Now you don't, I can't, we've talked about pushing. I can't push too hard because that creates a whole other problem. But a little bit of a push to get somebody, especially if we've got the individual that's never experienced the emotion before, yes, they get to the edge of it and they're like, I've never done this before. This scares me. I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I got to figure out how to get them on through. And we can. So it sounds like you experience more of the fear.
I do. And it's for those individuals. I think, it's interesting as we kind of think about the different groups that we see most often. I tend to have clients that come to me that are more of that attention end of things, the fast thinkers, the ones that experience a lot of struggle with maintaining attention, and then they developed struggles through executive functioning. But for the most part, their delay at all would be in that area of impulsivity and that end of things, right? And they academically are going to more likely have struggles like with math and maybe reading comprehension, but reading depends, right? So anyway, so for that group of individuals, what I see is that they experience heightened emotion. So more than they should for a situation. It has been a pattern. It is a pattern that occurs in their life. And so depending on how old they are known to have heightened emotions. And now I'm an individual that has heightened emotions. Anyone that knows me knows that I can cry. And when I think of something that is sparked from a memory of a sweet something, a sad something, it's liable. Basically, the way I put it is I have this thought and it comes out my eyes. Right? And but that's something that even for me, I struggled with for a long time, because it brought attention to me that I saw as negative attention. Right? People would look at me.
And I agree with you 100% on that. And I have talked to other practitioners and coaches, and they'll talk about the fact that even though we're the coach, we're the teacher, we're the tutor, and we're helping the individuals, we do draw the people to us that we learn from as well. So it is very interesting to me, because you're basically saying you get the criers, I get the people that walk up. But my story, I'm very simply put, I'm an only child. I was meant to be a boy. My parents will tell you this. I was meant to be a boy, and I was not. And so my father basically said, oh, well, we'll make her one. So in the sense of, let me clarify.
I know. I'm just laughing because I know you. Right? So I know you.
In the sense of it was never okay to cry. Like I was a kid that, I would bite my upper lip to not cry. I was probably 17, 18 years old before I ever really started crying. And now I'm like you. I'm like, if I want to cry, I'm going to cry. And if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting because my clients are more, when they hit that disorientation in regards to emotion, they lock up, they shut down, and you see just this blank face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And mine's going to be the other way. But you know what's cool? So this is a little off our topic, but I think it fits. Is that we are meant for those individuals that find us, because in order for someone to change, anyone to change, and because it's difficult to change all by yourself, you have to be guided in a way, and you can't be pulled. You have to be guided. And so you have to find those individuals that will meet you where you're at and help you along, right? Push you if you need to be pushed when you need to, but help guide you through it. And when they meet us, when our clients meet us, they find no resistance in us, because we're like, I recognize you, right? And so I had this conversation with a parent today. It was the coolest thing ever. And I didn't cry. I'm really proud of myself that I didn't cry, but I could have, because she said, I need you to know that she just loves you. I mean, I met this child once, spent 25 minutes doing a consultation with her, and she just loves you. She cannot wait to do this with you. And I thought, that is so nice, because guess what? I love her too. I can't wait to do this with her, because, you recognize. And that's what I told mom. I said, it's because I recognize her in me, and she knew it. She knew that I was talking her talk, right? That I could see her and I wasn't afraid of her. And so she wasn't afraid of me either. So there you go, and you can go and be, and it's pretty cool. But I'm sure you have the same experience, right? Those
Yes.
people that just and that's, they find you and you're the person that's going to be able to help them. So it's really, it is nice, but it really does, again, has to do with that emotion. It does.
Yes.
Being able to be, because emotion in and of itself is energy.
Yes. And it can hit a point depending on the word that comes to mind, depending on your wherewithal, depending on what you have experienced. So, for me, as a child, I wasn't allowed to cry. That was a deal breaker. I just was told stop, and I did. That was the thing.
And I was the one that bawled all the time, and it was what it was.
Well, and then when I made the transition, and I worked with coaches and counselors and of my own to work with me, and they're like, that's not good. You got a whole lot of stuff bottled up in there. We need to get it out. And then when it started to come out, it was incredibly uncomfortable for me to cry in front of other people, or even with myself. There was, because of the message that I'd gotten growing up. And then, like you said, talking about the energy, I felt the energy. I was a kid that felt other people's energy. So with my mom and dad, when I would start to cry, I could feel them get really uncomfortable before they said anything. And then again, I'm like, oh, we got to lock this down, because I'm upsetting the people around me. So in the beginning, when I work with a client and I help a client that does disorient as related to emotion, there is I call it a grace period, because they really are moving into a space that's very new for them. It is uncomfortable, and they have to feel their way. Interestingly enough, we're human, and emotion is part of being human. I always use the example of, we're a mammal, we're human. If you see a cat, can you tell when a cat is angry? Yeah.
Yes.
Annoyed.
Yes.
I mean, you can tell.
Yes. Yes.
If we see a deer, we know when the deer is scared. even before they bolt and run away.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
And then a dog, when a dog is happy, I mean, it's so, they're just.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we're mammals as well. And I kind of want to circle back around to, here in the United States, emotion is not something that we're encouraged to experience or to share and there is just a huge gamut of emotions. And I have a dear friend that is Italian, and all the emotions,
Yeah. 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 For sure.
and totally fine with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A very different culture. So when we work with clients, it's looking at, is it a learning difference? Is it related, excuse me, to a trauma?
Mm-hmm.
And then is it part of our culture that they're not giving themselves permission, and what is the reason for the overwhelm that's throwing them into the disorientation?
Right. And I think part of it too is we say, is it a problem? Right? Is it a problem for you? And ultimately, emotions are, yes, they're felt for ourselves, but generally it's part of some sort of a relationship, because none of us is an island unto ourselves. We all live in some form of community, even the individuals that are far out on their own, in the back, outback, whatever you want to say, they still have a community. It's just further out. And so, because as humans, we're social beings, we have to be able to communicate with each other. It's part of what we have a need to do. And because we have not yet figured out how to hive mind when we can't read each other's minds, right? It is necessary for us to come away from whatever our disorientation is back to ourself so that we can communicate. And so that disorientation around emotion can be either side, just like you and I just described, right? We're kind of two different sides of norm, and it's two different levels of emotion on either side. And every emotion has its counter, what would be considered socially typical, and then the too much or the too little, right? Wherever is off so far. And in the end, in order to communicate with those people around us, we have to somehow bring ourselves back to center, back to self, so that our physical body is able to communicate with others in whatever way it's going to be, whether it's through our mouth, through our eyes, our ears, however it is. So, yeah, it's interesting to me. It's really interesting to me because I deal with people and emotions all the time.
Now, Kelley, I'm curious, do you run into individuals that deal with shame?
Yeah, I think so, because now, granted, I very seldom work with adults right now. It's not my typical group. My typical clientele group would be somewhere between the ages of 6 and 18, 20. It gets up there depending. And then sometimes I'm working with the parents of the kids, which we know that adage, the apple doesn't fall from far from the tree. So if the child's struggling, chances are one of the parents have struggled in the past as well. So there's some shame in that older group, but the younger ones don't feel it yet. They haven't felt it quite yet. But as they get older, it's definitely there. And I personally, right, knowing that I also, I'm a product there. I definitely have a learning difference. And I had a lot of embarrassment about my emotions and feeling like it made me lesser, made it so people wouldn't hear me. And it took quite a bit of Well, actually, it took learning how to be fully focused and present to realize that, nah, it's what makes me me. And if I wasn't able to do the things that I do, I wouldn't connect with people the way I connect with them. And so instead of being my bane, my bad thing, right? It's actually my strength, and own it, and then be smart with it. Right.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to do that until I was 40.
Yeah. I hear you on that. So when I'm dealing with shame with somebody, usually it's an intense embarrassment that's almost a crippling emotion. So, they are in just a huge disorientation when they experience that. But when we have a learning difference, we miss social cues.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going along and we're well intentioned. There is no ill intention. In that moment, when we realize we've done something, that we're the only person in the room and everybody's looking at us like, that was strange. Why'd you do that? That's when we really tend to see that shame walk in the door. And then, the compassion as a coach that has personally experienced that, and having the compassion for the individual, and pulling that shame apart in such a way that they start to understand, well, it really wasn't your fault. There's a fault on this. And can we look at it for what it is, and maybe it's a challenge, maybe it's a mistake, maybe it depends on the individual I'm working with as to what language they end up choosing so that they can be okay with it.
Well, and do you find, because you work with older individuals, and we know that honestly, I'd say I'd lump them all together. Okay. People that have learning differences, they tend to be nonverbal processors. So they're going to think more in pictures. And we know that pictures stay with us. That's why we try to keep scary things from little kids, because we don't want them to have those scary thoughts in their minds. And the thoughts come from the things that we see. So as I experience things, I've created a picture of that. And whether or not that's reality, it's probably not, but it's the picture that I have, and I've held on to it. Right. And then every time something more happens along those lines, it just makes it, maybe more cements that picture.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And so for my individuals, they haven't gotten there quite yet. So my hope is that I can keep them. If I can get to them little enough, right? Maybe they don't have to, maybe they won't hold on to so many things. Right. But if you hold on to them, I remember, honestly. So, I was so blessed to get to work with you a little over a year ago, right? I would have never, because I'm really a chicken when it comes to things like that. Because I am so emotional, I don't set myself up easily for my emotions to come out. They come out on their own when I don't want them to. Okay.
Right.
So I certainly don't purposely put myself in a place that I'm in a ball, or that it's all going to come out, because I'm an ugly crier. Right. So anyways, and because I know that's how it's going to come out. But every person has some junk that they bring with themselves. There's no way you can't be a person and not have some sort of stuff, right? But being able to work with you was so powerful for me, because it was just like all this. Okay, the way I describe it to my kids is that you just get glommed on with junk. And I try to tell them, imagine that there's a raincoat that you're wearing and all the stuff's going to just puke on you. And it's just going to go off, right? But that's a beautiful picture, right? For me, all that stuff, my raincoat wasn't thick enough. So I just had the slime that I had held on to. So it was so cool to get to work with you. And even though I had done lots of self-help stuff myself, I mean, I worked through a lot of things myself, but to be able to just get rid of the last of it, so freeing, really, so freeing. So.
Yeah, and let me explain a little bit about that raincoat analogy.
Sorry. I hope somebody can appreciate my visions.
when I explain and I talk to somebody about their emotions and their identities, that we put these false identities in place. And it's like a raincoat. So if you see somebody that's wearing a raincoat, that person has an identity of a person that wants to stay dry. They're not a raincoat.
Right.
And so part of that analogy came from you and I having that conversation about, we're looking at these different raincoats that you've put on, and let's take those off so we can get to the identity that truly is you.
Oh, isn't that funny? Okay, so no, I have to stop in there. That actually, no joke, from the time I was young. So my mom used to tell us that when you leave the house, you have to put on your raincoat, because the world is going to want to throw stuff at you and you don't want it to stick. And so then, because I'm visual, when I did with my children, the world is going to want to on you and you don't want it to stick. But
Yeah.
that is so, I mean, with identity, and that is so right.
Yeah.
We do. We have that. We want to be that individual that stays dry, that stays as that's
really are meant to be. Yeah. Who
Mhm.
you really are. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
the work that we've been.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so thank you for joining us for this episode today, and really kind of talking about the generalities behind emotion and how we see that for individuals that have learning differences. Moving ahead, we know that there's specifics for each different type of learning difference. And so we will unpack those as specific podcasts so we can really kind of go into in depth. And Tina has her speciality, I have mine. And then we have some other things that are just general knowledge. But I think that our listeners, we hope that what you're getting from it is that little tidbit that you need and that you want to go find more about, you want to know more information about. So we so appreciate you joining us. And if you have found value with this podcast, we'd please ask you to like us and subscribe to our channel. Look for us to be coming out again. Our contact information, as always, is in the description for today's episode. So thank you for joining us. I'm Kelley Fitz with Empowering Minds.
And I'm Tina Kramer with Simple Learning and the patent pending sound device. Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.